when it comes down to it, Beau Pribula and Drew Allar need these winter workouts the most.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Zach Seyko, your host of Locked On Nittany Lions, joined again by a very esteemed guest that I'm privileged to have back on to talk some Penn State men's hockey on this show, and that is Eric Olson, Penn State men's hockey color commentator alongside his broadcast partner, Brian Tripp. Eric, it's great to have your expertise again as Penn State's going to take on number one Minnesota here.
Yeah, it's a big weekend coming up, and a lot of big points on the line. The final stretch here of the season, only 4 regular season games remaining. It goes by fast. In some ways the season is long and it's a grind, but then you get to this point in the season, you look back and say, "Wow, geez, that time from October to now went by so fast." But yeah, big weekend coming up.
We're going to start with football first and winter workouts. And Penn State's got a lot of incredible sports, and I'm bringing you on, to talk about men's hockey. But of course, you have expertise in football as well. So winter workouts are going on. Coaches are posting their winter workout warriors. This guy's won the day. This guy's showing out in practice. For you, when you look at this, who are some of the guys that you think need winter workouts the most, whether that's to establish a starting spot or win a key battle? When you look at winter workouts as a whole, what do you hope to accomplish when you see news like that from Penn State?
Yeah, I think, for one, the biggest thing you look for overall is just, improvement in some areas. And you can look at position groups. I know, when you had me on the first time a few weeks ago, we talked about winter workouts and some of the groups we're looking to see improvement in, and either improvement or build on some consistency and some of the things that they established in the fall. And that could be defensively, the DBs, because there's some turnover there, the linebackers really taking what they were able to establish and now advancing that even further and becoming that dominant group that we saw towards the end of the season. Offensive line wise, trying to maintain what they were able to establish down the stretch, and some of the new additions. So that's kind of like the overall thing. In terms of boiling it down a little bit more, I think I'm looking to see what can be established right now in these weeks in terms of just gelling with some of these new guys. You bring Storm Duck in defensively. How does he fit into the locker room right now? How's he fitting in with Manny Diaz's scheme? What his learning curve is going to be like. It's the right time now. This is what you want those weeks to be used for, trying to establish that. There's some guys, obviously, your underclassmen that are going to be looking to, get bigger and stronger and faster and really, develop into their position more. And then you have the upperclassmen who are not only trying to improve their bodies as well if they need to, but also maintain some things and try to work on their craft. But I'm looking to see how are those new additions establishing themselves, Storm Duck and the receivers that were brought in. How are they gelling right now with the quarterbacks, Allar and Pribula? Because, Pribula got a really good shout out one of the days, and it seems like he's having a great start to winter workouts as well. Drew is the guy, of course, everyone knows that, but I think Beau is going to be someone that can push him and drive him to be even better right now.
I'll take that a step further, Eric, because you make a lot of great points, but specifically with this Penn State team, because they're losing all 6 captains. They are getting all brand new captains. So even with the veterans coming back, I imagine that a Curtis Jacobs will be a captain when all's said and done. That's kind of the guarantee. Maybe a Hunter Norzad or an Olu Fashion. I think if you wanted me to sit right back and guarantee some guys, I would say Curtis Jacobs and Olu Fashion and maybe an Adisa Isaac. Yeah. But with that being said, they talked about the quarterback, saying that they need to see some leadership from 2 guys that are true sophomores. They are going into their second year of football, not just, this is their second season after the red shirt. No, they went through the learning curve, and Beau Pribula and Drew. Drew's a true sophomore, and Beau's in his redshirt freshman year, but they're both in their second year is what I'm getting at. So this leadership, you hope that Sean Clifford passed off enough to them, enough knowledge so that they're ready to go, because you want your quarterback to be a captain, one of those 6, And I think that's where Beau Pribula, he has that football mentality, I guess, is what I've heard a lot of people say. There's so many different ways to describe it, the it factor. And I think that translates well to leadership. So, on top of everything you said, the moving parts with the transfer portal, I think this Penn State team doesn't have a problem with a leadership identity, but they can if they don't figure it out.
No, that's a great point because, there's teams where like everyone looks at the quarterback as the de facto leader, regardless of,
Mhm.
what their personality is, or that's just the nature of the position, right? In football, like your quarterback is going to be one of your guys. And he has to be the way the quarterback commands the offense and things like that. So you bring up a great point. Penn State hasn't had this situation,
No.
right, since Christian Hackenberg, when he comes in as a young guy and he's put into the starting role and he has to take on that leadership role. And ever since then, it's been quarterbacks who had time to sit and see what it was like in front of them, and then they're a little bit older when they come in to that opportunity. But yeah, you bring up a great point. Leadership wise, it's not an easy thing to do. Obviously Drew has earned a lot of respect from his freshman year from some guys, but now that he has to step into that role, it's something different, and Beau is going to help him out a lot as well. If you can have a really tight knit quarterback room, it's going to make the biggest difference in the world, and you need a capable backup as well, because if something happens to Allar, you got to have a guy that
Yeah.
can come in, and I think Penn State's pretty set right now with these two guys.
I think Drew and Beau, just in general, the quarterback room, are the obvious choices when you want to ask, well, who benefits the most from these winter workouts? Specifically for you, Eric, which players do you think can benefit or even be hurt by the workouts if they don't do what they're expected to do? Just who has a lot on the line in this phase of the offseason?
Yeah, I think, like you said, quarterback wise, it's really important. You have to see, and you want to see those improvements in winter workouts and then over the summer and training camp and things like that. And, I can, stay on the offense and look at the running backs and, Singleton and Allen, because what they were able to do their freshman year, obviously everybody knew coming in, hey, these are two pretty talented guys,
Yeah.
but no one knew what type of season they were going to have. And a lot of it boiled down to what can the offensive line do for them? Can Clifford put them in good situations? Things like that. And then they have this monster season. Both of them do. Now it's expected, right? So you have to do the things you need to do to put yourself in a position to get better. That's the baseline now. That season's the baseline. Anything less than that is going to be looked at as a regression, and you can't have that, especially if the playoff is the aspiration. So I think it's a big opportunity for these two guys to make improvements, get stronger, get faster, uh, be able to grow more in the offense, and try to carry that over into next season. So I think quarterback wise, running back wise, it has to mesh so well. Those are areas that I'm looking to see that, hey, these are players who have big opportunities here to try to improve. And you can expand it from there to a couple of the receivers, obviously mentioning the transfer portal. What type of connection can they make? I'm not so much looking at defensive guys right now, because I think it's just, work out, see what you can improve. You're going to learn some more being put into bigger roles. And Manny Diaz now going into his second season here in Happy Valley. What type of tweaks is he going to make to the defense? I think I'm looking more on the offensive side of the ball right now at those positions and saying, Penn State is going to get where it needs to go or where it wants to go with the offense. The defense is going to put them in good situations, but the offense has to be able to convert and put up points and make big plays. The season is going to come down to, can they score points? And I think we've seen that in these playoff games. They're not 21-14 games.
No.
They're high scoring games. You got to be able to put up points.
Just for the sake of it, because I completely agree with you, I will just nominate a couple of guys on the defense, and they're both second-year players. You know, Singleton, Aller, Pribula, Allen. But if you look at the defense, you want Abdul Carter to really continue to embrace
Yep.
that number 11, and not just be a flash in the pan. You want him to be an All-American. You want him to be a true superstar, and not just like, okay, hey, he's on our radar now. How does he handle that? And then because the defensive line, just because everyone thinks that this group is probably the weakest link defensively, I think I don't really think there's a weak link, but just what people are saying, everyone's assessment is Zane Durant. I think when you have PJ Mustafer move on, another captain, I might add, and I've heard a lot of promise about Zane Durant. I think he can push for that spot by Hakeem Beamon. And I know there's Devon Ellies, I know there's Keziah Izzard, but Zane Durant has a lot of similar potential that where he can be an all Big Ten type of player and maybe even push into that All America conversation as well. So those are guys that I would throw in just for the sake of, points.
Yeah.
These games are 55 to 52, but defense needs to stop them from getting those tying points at the end of it. It is Locked On Nittany Lions. Eric Olson joining me here. I am Zach Seyko. We're talking some Penn State men's hockey as they take on number 1 Minnesota next. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So all you got to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything from the money line to point scorers to threes drained. Pick your favorite NBA bets, all of which include the money line, spreads, totals, the core markets. Then you have player props like points, rebounds, assists, etc. And there's so many other exclusive bets like the 2x3, 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/locked on. That is fanduel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Make sure you check out the brand new show, and that is Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get to hear from big name experts, insiders, players, and coaches. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I am Zach Seyko, joined by a very special guest, Eric Olson, Penn State men's hockey color commentator, and we are previewing Penn State men's hockey and Minnesota, number 1 versus number 5 in the pairwise. Penn State at home, Pagula. Now, they went out to Minnesota and did pick up a victory the last time these two teams faced, but a lot has changed since that first series meeting. Eric, when we last met on the show, we talked about, where can men's hockey go from the bye week? They get that extra time coming off the Ohio State series, and now they get that full window to prepare for Minnesota. So from what you've seen, what you've heard, what you're ultimately expecting, where do you think Penn State focused most of its attention going into this series?
Yeah, so, obviously rest and recovery was a big component, and the team at this point is looking to maintain consistency in the things they're doing well and focus on some of the things they're trying to improve on. And it's not a lot of big picture stuff. The way they approach making improvements is, they look at what they evaluate after every game and say, okay, these are the areas that we met our standards in based on the eye test and also based on the numbers that they look at. And then they try to see what are the areas we need to improve on. What can we address in practice to do that? And guys talked about this a lot, where it's a very fine line between working on things in practice and not detracting from other things. Hockey is one of those sports where, you work on some things in practice to try to fine tune something or improve on something, but you also need to do things that you were doing well to reinforce that. So it's a mix of both. It's not necessarily, hey, these are 5 things we need to go work on. We're going to spend one practice doing that, because now you've just spent an entire practice not doing something to maintain what you were doing well. So it's a very fine line between focusing on what to improve on and also maintaining things you did well. So that's how they approach practice. And yeah, it's pretty much what they've been working on with these off days here. And they had a great event on the bye week, charity event for sled hockey, where they played a sled hockey team. And Guy was talking about this at media during the week. They raised over $20,000 for sled hockey charity, which is an incredible number. The Roar Zone came out to support, community members came out to support, to watch this game between Penn State players and sled hockey team. That was a mix of ages and skills, and Dylan Lugeris really spearheaded this effort to create this opportunity, and the team fully ran this event. And that's what made Guy so proud, is all the players were involved in some aspect, whether it was playing on the ice. If you weren't playing, you were coaching, you were part of game day operations, you were running the music, you were doing PA announcing, hitting the goal horn. Everybody had a role, and the normal game day operations were hands off. So the team fully embraced that. That was a fun thing they got to do during the bye week. But now it's focusing on Minnesota and what Penn State can do to be successful against them, which is playing to their identity. This is a really good Golden Gopher team. I asked Guy earlier in the week, this is one of those series in the season where it's been a long time since you've seen the team you're playing.
Yep.
And both teams change between then and now, and Penn State especially. And Guy said, we are a very different team than we were the last time we played Minnesota. And we're a better team now, he said, than we were back then. And that's evident because they found some consistency in some lines. The freshmen have really grown, especially guys on defense. They've improved in some areas of trying to cut down on taking penalties. And that's another point. I'll talk about it in a second here. But from the time they played Minnesota the first time to now, in a very, very different team, in a very different position. Now they're fighting for, home ice in the first round.
Yeah.
They're fighting for a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. They have a lot to play for this weekend.
And so does Minnesota. I mean, they're going after to maintain that number 1 ranking, and they are also looking to clinch the Big Ten title. They had the chance against Wisconsin. They couldn't get it done. So they have their sights set on that against the Nittany Lions, and they're aware of the Nittany Lions. I think early in the season, Penn State was sneaking up on some teams, but now they've garnered that respect. I mean, they should. They're top 5 in the country in the pairwise. They're top 10, like as a consensus here. We know that Ben Schoen's not going to be available, out for the season. So where has Penn State changed in regards of who's going to get not necessarily his minutes, but his responsibilities? Where is the slack going to be picked up?
Yeah, it was tough when the injuries did start to pile up. And, I can say they are still without Ryan Kerwin, who is a really important forward and arguably the best shooter on the team. He is now day-to-day, though, so he's getting closer. He's probably not going to play this weekend. Wisconsin in the regular season finale is a possibility, but I think for sure we're looking at first round of the tournament, you get Ryan Kerwin back, which is going to be a huge infusion back into the lineup offensively. I can tell you, this weekend, Connor McMenamin and Jared Crespo are expected to play. Those were 2 guys that had been injured, and they play important roles. Jared Crespo, freshman defenseman, he's really come on strong the past couple of weeks before he got hurt. He's been partnered with Carter Shade, who's a fellow freshman. Those 2 have become a really solid pair together. They're playing great hockey, so it's good to get Crespo back this weekend. And McMenamin, who's a senior forward, he's a great 200-foot player. He can score. He's so good defensively, kills penalties. You need a guy like him in your lineup. When it comes to replacing Ben Schoen, who's a playmaker, he's skilled, can go up and down the ice. They're still waiting on Kerwin, of course. I think he is someone that can make up for what Schoen isn't going to be able to bring to the ice right now. But then you also have guys like Tyler Gratton, who had a great weekend at Ohio State. He looked the fastest he's looked all season. He played with a tenacity, a nose for the net, scored some goals. I think he's a guy that can contribute a little bit more offensively, and I know the coaching staff is looking for that. So there's some guys who, if you look at the stat sheet, you might say, they haven't scored a lot this year. Yeah, they're not a big impact offensively, but they are, and it's with the way Penn State plays hockey. So Christian Sarlo, Xander Lampa, Tyler Paquette, Tyler Gratton, they all play with this identity that they're going to try to outwork you and win battles, win pucks, and get pucks to the net. If they do that, they're going to put some goals in. And we've seen all those guys make flashy plays this season, but when they're at their best, it's playing that tough style of hockey where I'm going to outwork you, I'm going to beat you to the puck, I'm going to take the puck from you, and I'm either going to score or I'm going to set up a guy who's going to score on you. So it's kind of a group of guys that, you don't want to be top heavy in hockey.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. And there are some top heavy teams in the country right now. You have to have the depth when you go into postseason play. Penn State has that depth. It's just a matter of getting those points and getting that execution. And sometimes you can make great plays and not end up on the stat sheet. And we've seen guys do that. So I think as a group, they're in a really good spot. They're getting healthy again. It's the right time of year to get healthy and start playing your best hockey. And then you look at a team like Minnesota and what they've been able to do. They have one of the best lines in hockey with Matthew Nyes, Jimmy Snuggerud, Logan Cooley. They are just putting up point after point. All three of those guys are over a point per game players. But Minnesota is a testament to depth as well. Up and down their lineup, they can score. Their blue line is phenomenal. They have one of the best D-cores in the country. They've racked up 107 points themselves alone, just the defensemen. So they're guys you have to look out for as well. They can score on you, and they can also defend very well because they don't want their goaltender just enclosed facing a lot of shots.
It is Locked On Nittany Lions with special guest Eric Olson, Penn State men's hockey color commentator. I'm Zach Seyko, your host. We're talking Penn State hockey versus Minnesota, number 1 versus number 5 in the pairwise for over the course of Friday and Saturday in the Pegula Ice Arena. Penn State can really solidify its spot and have no doubt if they get a win here, there's no doubt that they're making the NCAA tournament. Even if things don't go well in the Big Ten tournament, that they will get that at-large bid. But of course, you want to take care of business. You don't want to leave it up to chance here. But that Minnesota team. So you started mentioning some of the players. Cooley and Sugaroo they're both freshmen. They built chemistry over time together as well. On the United States U18 team, they were the leading scorers for that team, scoring over 60 points in the past season. So not only do they have chemistry, they have talent. And this Minnesota team, they're very young. I think they had one of the largest freshman classes come in this cycle. They got a lot of offensive guys, a few defensive guys, and a goalie. But this was a team that was expected to be back in the spotlight after losing to Minnesota State in the Frozen Four last year.
Yeah, and they built for this season, and obviously the young talent that they brought in has made a huge impact. And Cooley and Snuggerud have the chemistry, they have the history together. I think it's well known that Cooley was a Penn State target, and Penn State was one of his last teams after he decommitted from Notre Dame. Penn State came real close to getting him, and I think one of the big reasons he chose Minnesota was because a lot of his former teammates and friends were going to go play there. So, and it's tough for Penn State to not get a guy like that, but Cooley's an outstanding player. The Arizona Coyotes are going to be getting a really good player when he decides he's done with college hockey, whether that's after this season or next season. And he's a guy that can play with a lot of skill. When he has the puck, you have to watch out. When we saw him up in Minnesota in the first half of the season, he was looking to make plays, and we saw his youth, I think, at that point, because there were times he made too much, or he was trying to do too much, and he turned the puck over a little bit. I think he's gotten better at that this season. It's right place, right time, when to make those plays, but he has a nose for the net. It's a dangerous line to defend because Matthew Nyes has an outstanding shot. He's a big body. He's tough to knock off the puck. Snuggerud's a playmaker. Cooley's a playmaker. They both can put the puck in the net. I mean, all three of those guys have 14 or more goals on the year. So when you're looking at a line to defend, you're looking at that. But then you also have a veteran like Bryce Brodzinski who's putting the puck in the net as well. He's been a thorn in Penn State's side when it comes to scoring key goals. So it's a tough team to defend, but a team that Penn State can absolutely play with. They outshot Minnesota in both games up there in Minneapolis, won the first night, lost the second night. One of the things that hampered them in game 2 was taking penalties. They took 6 penalties. A third of Minnesota's shots in that game came on the power play. So this is a team you got to stay out of the box against. And really, we can say that from here on out, because if you give a team 3, 4, 5 power play opportunities, it's either going to bite you because it went in the net, or it's going to bite you because now you've lost momentum offensively and they're starting to rack up some shots. So Minnesota's a team you don't want to give power play opportunities to. That's one of the big keys for this weekend for Penn State. If you can stay out of the box, play them 5-on-5, you have the speed and the skill and the offensive scheme to absolutely go up against Minnesota and put goals in the back of the net. They have the ability to break them down defensively, even though they have one of the best defensive cores in the country. This is a really intriguing matchup. I think this is a series where you can, at the end of it, you can either say, yeah, Penn State's playing really good hockey right now, they're ready for postseason play, or you're going to say, there's still a few things to tweak before they're really at that level, but we have another weekend ahead of us in Wisconsin. So this is going to be a really, really entertaining series, I think.
Yeah, and Wisconsin just, of course, beat Minnesota. Well, they split the series. They beat, Minnesota took one, Wisconsin took the other. And that defensive, I think Minnesota's a better defensive team just because they had so much turnover offensively. And yes, you did get the young talent. Like I said, Cooley is one of the, he's one of the best NHL prospects for as young as he is. He's top 5, according to The Athletic. And they had, but the defensive guys, the goalie, and you also had guys like Brock Faber, on this team, but he's not going to be in this game. He's not going to be in this series. He's going to be missing. So where can Penn State exploit that matchup?
Faber's a really talented guy, and that's a key loss for Minnesota right now, and it's looking like he is going to be out for potentially a few weeks. And one of the last things I read was he's expected to be back at the time of the season that it matters for Minnesota. Look, Minnesota's going to lock up the regular season. Mm-hmm. It's basically a formality at this point, whether it happens this weekend or in the final weekend. And they'll have that first round bye in the Big Ten tournament, and they'll be playing a semifinal and looking to be hosting a championship game. So their season comes down to the NCAA tournament because they're a team that wants to win that this year. So I think he should be back by then, most likely, just based on some of the early things I've seen. So he's a big loss for them right now, but you have Jackson Lacombe, who's another veteran defenseman. He's 4th in scoring on this team. So I mentioned that trio of Nye, Snuggerud, and Cooley. Well, then you got Jackson Lacombe, who's 4th on the team in points. He can score. He racks up assists. He doesn't have a lot of power play goals, which means he's scoring at 5-on-5 or in other situations. So he's a guy that can make a big impact in games. And for Penn State to be able to break them down defensively and get to Justin Close, who I'll be the first one to admit, when the net went to Justin Close last year after Jack LaFontaine signed with Carolina, I really wasn't a believer. I didn't think he was the guy who hadn't played much hockey at all. No one knew much about him. Could he come in, just past the midway point of the season and be a difference maker for the team? And he proved that down the stretch. He won a ton of games, had a great tournament run. He's a smaller guy. I think he's listed at only 5'10", whatever he is, under 200 pounds. When you're looking at him in net, it's deceptive. So in the Big Ten, there's so many good goalies. You got really big goaltenders like Eric Portillo and Jakub Dobesh, who are 6'4" and up. Portillo's like 6'6", over 200 pounds. Dobesh is, I think, 6'4", 6'5", over 200 pounds. These guys are monsters, literally, in the net. They take up so much space. So as a shooter, you don't have a lot to look at when you're looking at the net. When it comes to Close, he's a smaller guy. You have more of the net you're looking at. And it can be a little deceptive because you think there's space, but he's so athletic that he can take that space away from you. It's like a little teaser. Oh, you want to come here, high glove? Go ahead. I'm going to take it away as you shoot. So he's really a really strong goaltender. He's been tough for Penn State to score against. You have to get to the front of the net against him, which means you have to play Penn State's brand of hockey, which is winning pucks in deep, getting shots to the net, and getting bodies to the net. You can't be getting perimeter shots because if he can see it, he's going to stop it. You have to get bodies to the front of the net, try to get second and third chance opportunities on him. If you can do that, you're going to get chances to put it in the net and be successful. So if Penn State's going to do well, it's because they're getting opportunities in the dangerous areas of the ice. If they're struggling a bit, it's because Minnesota's been able to keep them to the perimeter. And that's when Penn State has struggled the most against teams, is they're not getting to those dangerous areas of the ice. You mentioned the Wisconsin series last for Minnesota. They win night one, but they win night one being outshot by the Badgers. And they win it because they scored on their quality opportunities. Game two, when Wisconsin wins, they had the puck, Minnesota did, for basically that entire third period. Wisconsin only had 5 shots in the third. I watched the second half of that third period. Minnesota had the puck the entire time, moving it around offensively. The Badgers blocked a ton of shots, and that's what you have to be committed to defensively, blocking shots, playing well in front of your goaltender to keep Minnesota out of the net. And even then, it's going to be tough to do. But it's interesting. Night one, Minnesota wins. They only had 10 shots through the first 2 periods. They ended up racking up, I think, 28 overall. But 10 shots through 2 periods, they had a 3-0 lead after that. If they get quality opportunities, they're going to score with all the talent that they have.
Eric, you kind of got into it there. The keys to beating Minnesota, as Wisconsin showed, that this is the blueprint if you want to get the best of the number one Golden Gophers here. So ultimately, a final question here: what are you expecting from the series? Penn State, I think it's going to be tough to sweep, but the split, I think, is very realistic here, being that it's in Pagula. You got the rest. Minnesota, it had to play Wisconsin very recently. They didn't get the same kind of break that Penn State did. So there's also that rest versus rust debate coming into for the Nittany Lions. So what are you ultimately expecting for the flow of this series?
I think a split is certainly reasonable and within reality. I think it's absolutely doable, and that they're going to be looking for a sweep. They're going to be looking for every point they can get because second place isn't out of reach. Minnesota has a 5-point lead right now on Penn State. That's going to be tough to make up, but you get a sweep and Michigan rather gives you some help. Anything can happen, but Penn State's playing for home ice still. They got to rack up points. I'm probably looking at a split this week, and I think they can absolutely win one. You lose one, you hope it's a close loss or they at least play well in it, but they need to get 3 points at a minimum this weekend because they're currently sitting in 6th place. Now they have 2 games in hand on Michigan and Notre Dame, who are 1 point ahead. So if you can get at least 3 points, you're putting yourself in a much better situation to get at least 4th place at a minimum and secure home ice in that first round. But anything less than that, and now you're really looking at needing to sweep Wisconsin. Now the team's not looking ahead to that, of course. That's what we can do here, but 3 points at a minimum has to be the goal in order to put themselves on the right foot to getting home ice.
And if you want to do this right, if you can't make the game because it's going to be sellout crowds in Pagula, you can listen to Eric and Brian Tripp, his broadcast partner, on GoPSUSports.com for both these games that are going to be played at 6:30 Eastern time on Penn State's home ice. Eric, before I let you go, how else should people follow you, follow the team, keep up with everything as Penn State men's hockey looks to really make a push in the NCAA tournament with their eyes on the Frozen Four?
Yeah, social media is a great way to do it. My partner Brian Tripp does a lot of great stuff with all Penn State sports, and he does a feature with hockey during the week called Morning Skate with Brian Tripp, and this week's video already came out. It's Darts with Guy Godowski, so they had a really good conversation. So be sure to check that out. Follow the team's social media, and you can check out Brian and I on Twitter, and see what we're looking at coming into the game. Usually we'll post some sort of preview beforehand of the weekend.
Go psusports.com if you want to hear you definitely want to listen to the call if you can't make it to the game in person for Brian and Eric covering the team live as it goes on. But Eric, thank you so much for the time again. Always appreciate the insight, the insider knowledge about the team, and can't wait for our next conversation as they look to get that home ice advantage in the Big Ten tournament. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course, Zach. Appreciate it. It's a fun time of year to be talking hockey.
Thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Check out the brand new show, and that is Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get to hear from big name experts, insiders, players, and coaches. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the Locked On Nittany Lions YouTube if you haven't already. Follow on Twitter, my personal account at Zach_Seyko, and the show account at Locked On Nittany. More content to come. Of course, Penn State football, as the winter workout news comes about, we'll be able to bring it to you here, and more position previews for the 2023 season. That'll all be on the way here on Locked On Nittany Lions.